Welcome to this important event in our city's history. My name is Michele Melendez. I'm the director of the City of Albuquerque's new Office of Equity and Inclusion. And I would like to begin by recognizing that this beautiful city of ours is on native land. I would also like to acknowledge the importance of this day in our nation's history. Today is Juneteenth, African American Emancipation Day. We have none other than Hakeem Bellamy here to share a poem to help us all take in the meaning of this important day of Juneteenth.
Hello, everybody. There we go, up here. Here we go. I'm thankful to Michele's office. I'm thankful to Mayor Keller and the administration for making race equity the center of their campaign and not something that's an afterthought. And it's an auspicious day to be able to share that with all of you today as we embark on that journey together, because no person or administration can do it alone. We have to do it as a community. But it also happens to be Juneteenth. So I usually am, when I'm not at work on this day, I'm usually somewhere in the community sharing words about what this holiday means to the African American community nationwide. And last year I was part of something at the Albuquerque Museum, which oddly enough, that's the department that I work in now, Cultural Services. And it was a little bit of a preamble and some contextual background to why Juneteenth is an important holiday for everyone, but specifically for the African American community in our country. So this was just a preamble to that much longer piece. That piece was about 90 minutes. This is about 3, so don't get a little anxious there. And it goes like this. June 19th is perhaps the oldest holiday celebrated by African Americans. It is the grandfather of all such observances. June 19th, 1865 marks the date that all slaves in the United States were officially made free. Free. So on this day, we humbly ask that you set your Facebook status to free. It's complicated. Freed slaves in the state of Texas created and developed the June 19th celebration in 1866. Legend has it that the name Juneteenth was derived from a little Negro girl who could not pronounce June 19, so she said Juneteenth, and the name caught on and was used throughout the state of Texas. Texas. It's complicated. Juneteenth acknowledges the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation. New Year's Day, 1863, did not free the slaves of the state of Texas. In fact, those slaves did not get their freedom in arrears, did not receive the news until almost 2.5 years after the official signing and announcement was given. And I'm fairly sure that that little Negro girl who couldn't pronounce June 19th, so she said Juneteenth, that little Negro girl could at the very least count to 2.5. It's like the 4th of July, a new Negro anthem in Texas circa 1866, patron state of James Byrd circa 1998. But in the 1860s, Juneteenth celebrations included prayers, preaching, barbecue, red soda water, watermelon, desserts, dancing, games, rodeos, and readings of narratives by former slaves and the Emancipation Proclamation out loud. Quote, that on the first day of January in the year of our Lord 1863, all persons held as slaves within any state or designated part of a state, the people whereof shall be in rebellion against the United States, shall be thenceforward and forever free. And the executive government of the United States, included the military and naval authority thereof, will recognize and maintain the freedom of such persons, and will do no act or acts to repress such persons or any of them in any efforts that they make for their actual freedom. Thank you.
Thank you, Hakeem. And I have to say how happy it makes me to see so many of you out here to participate in our civic life and to bring focus to racial equity. I know that our state representative, Javier Martinez, is here, and that he, along with Senator Linda Lopez, were instrumental in passing a bill to address institutional racism at the state level, only to have it vetoed last year. But they keep bringing it back. And that's what we need, is every government to recognize the need to address racial equity in our city, in our state, and nationally. We also have Councillor Sanchez here. Thank you, Councillor. And Councillor Cynthia Borrego. We also have members of the Commission on Indian Affairs, Chairman Ronald Solomon and William Riding. We also have members of our Human Rights Board in the audience. Thank you for that. And Councillor Garduño, who is my personal equity advisor. And as you see behind me on the stage, we're releasing today a very important report that was prepared by PolicyLink, a national organization in cooperation with many community organizations here in Albuquerque and with support from the Kellogg Foundation. And this report is being made available on our website. It's 119 pages. We also have some copies of that, a synopsis, I should say, not all 119 pages. As many as, I think we brought 50 copies, so if you could please share, but also go to our website. I also just want to point out that we've got an excellent team in place for this new Office of Equity and Inclusion. And we are on our way to making a real difference in the lives of everyday Burqueños. And our team is made up of Deputy Director Brittany Ortiz. She's the one with all the copies, so if you need a copy of today's press conference, press release, or some of the data, please see Brittany. We also have our tribal liaison, Don Begay. We have coordinator Mariela Ruiz Angel, who is the coordinator of the Office of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs, as well as our interns, Sunny Hakani and Sanya Fulalove. And next week, we'll be welcoming a new civil rights attorney to the office. We've got our city attorney here as well, Esteban Aguilar, Jr. So today, what we're talking about is we know that local government has played a very important role in creating and maintaining racial inequity, and that it's up to us now to intentionally intervene and to disrupt those systems that continue to perpetuate inequities. And we in the Office of Equity and Inclusion are approaching this work from many different angles. The first is by holding a mirror up to ourselves and examining our own practices within city government. So we are looking at who we are hiring to work in city government, who we are doing business with as a city, and where we are investing our taxpayer dollars. And I'm going to go over some of the specific actions that we have taken in these first 3 months of this office in a moment. But first, I'd like to tell you about some of the ways that we are making racial equity a priority throughout city government. We have introduced a racial equity tool to be used in decision-making for programs, policies, and budgets. We provided our first racial equity training with our national partners, the Government Alliance on Race and Equity. And we're building that curriculum into the city's training curricula that happens for all employees. And that's just the beginning. Dawn and her team organized a really well-done Native American summit last month. And we are co-hosting a hate crimes seminar later this week at the Albuquerque Indian Center on Wednesday and here at City Hall for city attorneys and APD on Thursday. Mariela and Brittany helped distribute more than 1,000 youth bus passes with my friend Christopher, who I saw in the audience, by reaching out through our community partners to ensure that young people of color have access to transit, to get to work, to get to school, to get places for recreation, and to get to places of civic engagement. The team has also worked hard with the Indicators Progress Commission to make sure that Spanish speakers can fully participate in the city's goal setting. Our team has also conducted a language accessibility survey, and we found a lot of room for improvement. And the point has been well taken by all the departments in the city, including planning, zoning, transit, and aviation. And we are working with immigrant advocacy organizations throughout the city to implement the city's immigrant-friendly city resolution. Now let me go back for a moment to the 3 areas where we are focusing our efforts on making a big difference in city government. In the area of workforce equity, we are conducting an analysis of the city's workforce diversity, and we are implementing recommendations to, number 1, enrich the pool of applicants by actively recruiting from within priority communities and by banning the box so that we don't screen out people at the very first step in the process. We have also limited internal-only postings for city jobs so that we don't perpetuate the inequities that we already know exist. We are also making sure that our job application website is bookmarked in all libraries, community, and senior centers, and that staff there are able to help people apply for jobs. These are just the very few of the first strategies that we've been doing in these first few months with the help of a beautiful staff and HR director who has taken the lead on this. There are many, many more changes to come. In the area of procurement equity, we are asking that all companies who register as potential vendors with the city tell us if they are minority or women-owned. 1, they get points on their application if they do so, and 2, we want to establish a baseline assessment of who we're doing business with as a city, and then track our progress going forward. We will have a lot more to share in the coming weeks about how we are reforming the procurement process and what we are doing to support small, local, and minority-owned companies to do business with the city. And when it comes to city infrastructure investments, the mayor made sure that the 2019 capital improvement program prioritizes underserved neighborhoods. So I'm looking at you, Enrique. And he has assigned our office with providing him a map. Imagine that. Showing what the priority neighborhoods are by income, educational inequities, and other factors that show that they've been underinvested historically. And this month we are reviewing projects with all of the department directors and applying criteria to rate those projects for which fall into the priority areas. We will be posting many of our reports, new dashboards, news and events on our new website and on my Twitter feed. So please follow me at Michele CABQ, and including this policy link profile, which we are releasing today, with the hope that all of you, because I see in the audience so many organizations that themselves work on racial equity, these are tools for all of us to use to address equity and to hold us all accountable. Like we all know, we have no time to waste. So we are taking this opportunity to get to work making racial equity a priority in Albuquerque. Thank you. And next we have our mayor to tell us why this is a high priority for our city's administration.
Thanks. All right, well, good morning, Albuquerque. What a beautiful morning. And of course, we always like to say, you know, we have a new one Albuquerque branding effort that we're going to talk about a little bit later, which actually is part of this. But I want to say also that it is so great to see everyone out here this morning. And I mean that like literally. I see so many faces from all aspects of our community, and also to see us all in the shadow of a civic plaza that is being rejuvenated and is now being used by all of our city. It's just a reflection of all the reasons both why I ran for office and why I get up every morning. So thank you all for coming out here. This is truly special for this very, very important issue to have everyone here. I also want to mention we have a bunch of city staff here, especially executive staff, our city attorney, some folks, our deputy finance director, our cultural affairs deputy director, our president of city council's over there. I see our representative Martinez. I see Councilor Garduño. This is an issue that everyone has worked on for so long, and I am so glad to actually be the person who at least is saying, here's where we're at today. We are holding up a mirror for ourselves to see where we're at in terms of equity. And that is really the first step. And so I think the first step actually was taken by everyone here in terms of all the work you've been putting in and how much you care about these issues. But publicly, the first step is acknowledging where we're at. And we have not done that before, ever, to my knowledge. And so that's what we are going to do here today, and that's what's up behind me. So I want to start out with, personally for me, I was obviously born and raised here in Albuquerque, but in terms of my own even racial awareness, I have to say that really started with a trip to the Aspen Institute for Racial Equality that a woman named Ona Porter forced me to go to. I don't see Ona in the crowd, but I was going to, there's Ona. Thank you, Ona. That was a huge step for me, and I want to share this because we're going to talk about our city's journey, which is much more important, but I think it's also important that we share our own race equity journey awareness as well. And so it started with that, and then of course the Kellogg Foundation, who I know has been a part of this. I was a race equity fellow with Kellogg, and that's where I was able to meet folks who'd been aware and enlightened on a number of these issues their entire lives. And so for me, that's when I was able to really connect what I could do in public service on these issues. And so today is the fruition in many ways of that journey. And of course, essentially just the first step on a much longer journey that now we're going to take together as a city. So, since being elected your mayor, we wasted little time on this issue. Step one was forming the Office of Equity and Inclusion, the first ever in our city, and hiring Michele to run it. Thank you, Michele. Now, we know that we have faced significant challenges that we are attacking from all sides, and we're doing it differently than any administration before us. And we also are owning the fact that government has played a primary role in the historical creation of perpetual racial inequities. And I think that's a very important statement and something we've got to remember as elected officials, but as citizens, these kinds of inequities don't happen by accident. We all contribute to them in many ways, but the reality is government is a huge contributor, and so here to own up to that this morning. Now, we also must address the systematic issues behind working with communities that have been impacted by inequity. And this is something else that you see as part of our One Albuquerque approach that our CAO is going to talk about. But the idea is that we're one community and we rise and fall with the least of us. And that's why we need to help our underserved neighborhoods. That's why we need to specifically address inequities in parts of our community. Now, all across the country and in our city, there are dozens, if not hundreds, if not thousands of organizations who are now aware of these issues and engaging and will also be holding us accountable for working on them. Many of them are represented here today, but I do want to let folks know in Albuquerque that the kinds of issues we're talking about are front and center in urban cities all around the country. And so while they might be new for some of the general public, they are not new to the majority of our country. And so it's about time Albuquerque get on board and start talking about these issues as well. Now, we believe that all people living in Albuquerque deserve economic stability. And when we have working poverty on the rise in Albuquerque, such as 20% of Native American women, 18% of Latino and Native American men, 15% of Latina women working full-time that do not earn enough to support a living wage equivalent to support their families, that is wrong, and that is not fair, and that does not reflect our values. Now, this cycle of poverty in Albuquerque, I think historically in some ways we've said is somehow inevitable, or it's just part of who we are. That is also absolutely not true. And if you think about that kind of defeatist attitude, that sort of notion that, woe is us, this is part of our mission and something that I need all of your help in. We do not have to accept that as the status quo, and we shouldn't. And so we're not doing that today. The cycle of poverty in Albuquerque is not inevitable, and we believe that if we create an economy that works for all of us, we can actually have an inclusive economy, and it's a place that provides for our children and enables our children to stay here and also do what they love. I think this is another false trade-off that we've been perpetuating, unfortunately, by saying, well, you can stay here, but you can't make as much money. Or you can stay here, but the school's XYZ. It's like this trade-off to live in Albuquerque. We have to get past that, and we have to make sure that that is not a real trade-off. Because I think on one hand, in some ways it is, but that doesn't mean it always has to be going forward, and that's what we want to try and change. So my administration is embarking together with our city on an intentional equity journey. And with many of our community leaders and economic developers and organizations who share this vision of a safe, inclusive, and innovative city, we are united by one value: to see our city's diversity as our greatest asset. And that means that we also have to walk the walk in terms of how City Hall supports that diversity. So we are jointly releasing this 119-page equity profile report on the city of Albuquerque. It was developed by PolicyLink and PERE, which we'll talk about a little bit later, and with funding from the Kellogg Foundation, which we very much appreciated. This is data from city government and other sources that can guide our planning and our actions to close those equity gaps going forward in Albuquerque. As I mentioned, this is part of a national movement. 90 cities are involved in this, and there are community partners joined by the Government Alliance for Race and Equity, which we're a part of, who've been working intentionally to transform our current reality into the vision that I mentioned earlier that we should all share. So we're initiating these steps today, and we have a whole host of initiatives that literally we'll be talking about for the next 4 years and however long it'll last after that on this issue. And so to shine a little bit on some of the disparities, but also some of the early ideas that we're working on in terms of how we can hopefully address this. It will be a long road, but we're getting started today. So to tell us more about that is our CAO, Sarita Nair. Thank you.
Hey, thanks everybody. It is amazing to see so many people out here to talk about equity. When the mayor talked about his equity journey and it just being Father's Day, I've been thinking about my father a lot. He passed a couple years ago, but he was really instrumental in my equity journey because I remember him telling me after what must have been an exceptionally bad day at the office, never forget who you are because they never will. And I was 8, that was a little heavy, but it instilled in me a consciousness that I carry with me today, and that's why it's such an honor to be able to stand up for the equity work that this administration intends to do. There is so much amazing data and information in this report. I really encourage everyone to just dig in and spend an afternoon looking at it, and it's all real pretty too. Which reminds me, we have Brittany Ortiz who makes our data look good, and she is an amazing data analyst who's part of Michele's team in the Equity and Inclusion Office, and so I want to make sure that everybody knows that she's around too. She can make all these amazing charts and graphs come alive for our work as well. So what I really want to focus on, though, is economic development and how that fits together with the information in this report. There's a great chart on here on page 34 that talks about declining and stagnant wages for the bottom half of workers, and let me tell you what it says. From the years 1979 to 2014, so most of my life, probably more than half of your lives, the wages in Albuquerque have gone down by 11.4% for the bottom 10th percentile of our workforce, down 10.3% for the 20th percentile. And for the 90th percentile, the folks who are doing the best, our wages have only increased by 5% compared to a national average of 17%. So what this tells us in terms of hard truths and understanding where we are and how we got here is our economic development policy hasn't been working. And it hasn't just been working for some of us. It hasn't been working for any of us, partly because we have not been intentional about making sure that it works for those of us who are struggling the most. So when we then turn to page 42 of this report, it kind of shatters another myth, which is that education is the answer to everything. Absolutely, education is such a key part of growing our economy, but what this chart tells us is that whether you have less than a high school diploma or higher than a bachelor's degree, people of color are still making less than white folks, regardless of education. And that wage gap is between $25 for Latinos and $29.10 for that highest level of education. So again, while we obviously always want to pursue education as a tool for economic development, if we don't do that with an equity lens, if we're not consciously addressing issues of structural racism, then we're not ever going to achieve the goals that we need to in terms of improving our economy as a whole. And then the last chart I want to talk about is on the very next page. I know you guys are just getting so excited to go home and just dig open this report. But it talks about, of course, that women of color earn the lowest wages at every educational level. So same statistics, you're looking at a wage gap between $22 for women of color and $32, 10 bucks an hour for folks who have a BA degree or higher. So this is not about education. If we don't look at race, and then if we don't continue to look past race to intersectionality, we're not going to be able to address the economic challenges that we have. And so we are taking exactly that approach in our economic development department. We are forming an outreach office for minority and women-owned businesses to very intentionally target and meet these communities where they're at. And one of our specific initiatives within that office is to look at all of our government contracts and the millions and millions of dollars we spend and say, how do we spend those both more locally but also with more women and minority-owned businesses? And then where those businesses are not yet at a scale where they can meet the sometimes very significant demands of government, how do we help them scale up in increments of one employee at a time so that it's sustainable, so that they can really take advantage of all the spending that our government does, because this is our money. We want it to help our community. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Michele. But again, I just want to thank everyone for coming out to talk about equity today. And I hope that as we continue to talk about equity for the next 3.5 years, we can count on all of your support. Thank you.
So before we go back to Michele too, I wanted to not miss this opportunity to ask for your help, because the kinds of things that we're going to try and do, you know, historically, folks have always wanted an administration or a mayor, like all across the country, to sort of own up to these problems and acknowledge them and say they're going to do something about them. We're doing that. We can check that one off the box, or check that box off. What I need is your help to actually execute. And this is a message to all of the nonprofits who work on this issue, all of the foundations who fund this issue. We need help to actually make these solutions real. We have a good idea of what we want to do, and we want more input, and we want to do more. But we actually have to achieve some results, and we actually have to do the things we're talking about. That's what we need your help on. And we also need your help getting 5 votes on City Council. So what I'm talking about is we are trying to direct our actual investment, literally our taxpayer money, in a way that goes through an equity lens. The good news is so far, Council's been very supportive. But I'm just telling you, there are fights ahead where we are going to say explicitly, this is about equity. And we need your help to win those fights. And we need folks' help to help our administration do this. We have 2 people in our Office of Equity and Inclusion. And we have an army of amazing folks who know more about this issue than us. We need you to help us with the day-to-day, the blocking and tackling, and to educate the rest of our community on these issues. So I'm just letting you know, I hope we can call this sort of first base, but if we're going to get all the way around the plate, it's going to take all of us together, and there are going to be a lot of fights along the way, and we're going to need your help. So I hope you'll stand with us. Thank you.
So I just want to thank everybody, because I look out in the audience and see people who have been fighting and who I know will continue to fight. And now you have new allies within city government, and you know how to reach me. And please check us out on our new website, follow us on Twitter, and get involved in every way that we ask you. Thank you.